Generation 1, Kanto. Generation 2, Johto. Generation 3, Hoenn. Generation 4, Sinnoh. Generation 5, Unova. Generation 6, Kalos. Generation 7, Alola. And Generation 8, Galar. Depending on where you played Pokemon in the past, you have your favorite generation. And today I am going to be going over, essentially, my favorites. This is going to be quite the controversial topic. So, I hope you're ready, ladies and gentlemen, because it's math time! Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Generation Millennium. I'm your visually impaired host, Jeffro Madness, and as I said, we'll be going over my top 8 Pokemon generations, with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet representing Generation 9 coming out in just a couple of months from now. I thought it's about time I covered more podcast topics because I haven't uploaded that many of them. And well, I just want to get these off my chest. And if you've been on my Twitch streams or you just listen to my other videos, you might have an idea as to my favorite generations. However, I actually want to go over these in like a different manner because favorite generation does not mean favorite games. Because for example, let's say look at the current generation we're in, Generation 8, we have, if you want to count them as like part of Generation 8, we have Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee, we have Sword and Shield, Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, Legends Arceus, and not to mention a bunch of spin-off games that I will not be mentioning because I don't really count them per se, but then we also have a bunch of games that came out here in the 8th generation, like New Pokemon Snap, Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX, and a whole slew of other stuff, like Pokemon Unite, Masters EX, Pokemon Go got major upgrades and whatnot. So I won't be counting all of those games, but like, the way I'm going to be doing these lists is essentially going to be mostly just based on like my experiences and how I enjoy each generation as they came along. Because my experiences in each generation differ depending on the years that they went by. And like for example, Generation 8 began back in 2019 and up to 2022. Later of this year, Scarlet Violet's going to come out for Gen 9, so that's roughly a 3-year production cycle, which is pretty typical for a Game Freak. For example, Generation 7 came out in 2016. Let's see, Gen 6 was 2013. Gen 5 was 2010. I think Gen 4 was 2006. Gen 3 2002. Generation 2 was 1999, I believe, somewhere around there. And then Gen 1 was 1996. I just pretty much went backwards there. And roughly a 3 to 4 year gap in between each generation is pretty typical, so depending on what time in my life I experience each generation, that's pretty much how I'm going to be talking about each generation, and I will be talking about my experiences here. And just for a point of reference, I was born in 1991, so you can also be going over like how these games came over to America, the United States, North America, and around Generation 5 or so is when they started recently. I think that's when they started releasing the games worldwide simultaneously, or Gen 6, Gen 5 or 6, somewhere around there. So at any rate, let's begin with, at the number 8 spots, we have, drumroll, the 5th generation of Pokemon, with Black, White, Black 2, and White 2 being the 4 games in this generation. And the reason why I had this at the very bottom is for a multitude of reasons. The first of which, it came out in 2010, which for me, at that point, it was like, that was around like my, when it came out, I think I was like getting to my second year of college, and by that point in my life, essentially most people were not really participating in Pokemon. If they were, they weren't like hardcore about it, they were just doing casual, maybe just because they were longtime fans and they just wanted to do so out of, I don't know, just for the heck of it, but they weren't like competitive about it, at least those in my area. Like, they were more into like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, Magic the Gathering, maybe like honing other life skills, I guess. Like, maybe like, I knew this one girl who was very good at drawing anime, like Naruto characters. Whew, she was good. But, yeah. So it was pretty much like the dark ages for when it came to socializing for me in terms of Pokemon. So my real life experience with Pokemon was really in the falling at that point in time. But even like, just if you don't count that, just the games themselves were very controversial, because like one of my least favorite things about Gen 5, at least in terms of Black and White, is this is when dynamic experience was brought into the franchise. Like, say for example you knocked out a Pokemon, if you and the Pokemon that was defeated were at the same level, let's say you got like 500 experience points for that. But let's say you're at a higher level than the Pokemon that was defeated, then you would get less experience, maybe like 300 instead of 500. But if you're at a lower level than the Pokemon that was defeated, instead of that, you would get more experience, maybe like, I don't know, like 700. This is just rough estimates. But yeah, this is when the dynamic experience method was brought into the franchise, and I really, really did not like that. And also, this is when the shaking grass mechanic was also brought in. They expected you to use the shaking grass to fight against Wild Audino, which is essentially Gen 5's version of Chansey, to get a ton of experience points, but that was just tedious, because one, you have to wait for shaking grass to come, which is not guaranteed, and then second, you have to hopefully run into Audino, which is most of the time, but not always guaranteed. So you might end up using a couple of repels, because if you run into another wild encounter before you even reach the shaking grass patch, then the shaking grass resets, and you just wait for it all over again. It's just a mess. And on top of that, speaking of knockoff Pokemon or just whatnot, the Unova region, like, it was far too linear. Like, this is when Pokemon really become more simplistic, because they realized a lot of people who grew up with Pokemon at this point were either maybe they're growing out of Pokemon and they're like interested, so I guess they're trying to dumb things down for a younger demographic. Because if anyone who's played the previous generation of Gen 4, oh boy, this is when things really began to fly off the rails in terms of, I wouldn't say difficulty, but I would say annoyances, to put it bluntly. And then the Pokemon themselves, Generation 5 introduced a grand smacking total of 156 Pokemon total. And even if you were to take out the Mythicals from that list, that's still 152, which, if you don't include Mythicals for Gen 1, still beats Kanto by 2 Pokemon. And then if you do include Mythicals, it still beats by like 5 Pokemon for Kanto's 151 to Unova's 156, which is pretty insane. But what's even more insane is just the fact that, like, a lot of these Pokemon you don't even remember. Like, if it wasn't for, like, later on in Sword and Shield, like, the fact in the DLC Crown Tundra that you needed Cryogonal to unlock the door to Regice, like, if it wasn't for that, most of you probably forgot that Cryogonal even exists as a Pokemon, and here's the problem with that. One, it only appears in one place in the entire game for Black and White, and I think same for Black 2 and White 2. And then if you want to include even more ridiculousness in that one location, it only appears 5% of the time in the winter season. All other seasons, it only appears at 1%. Although I guess that was a bit of a unique thing about the 5th generation, is they added in the season mechanic. So like every single month, the games would cycle through another season. Let's see, there's summer, autumn, winter, and spring. And they would just shuffle through those every single month. So technically through the course of an entire year, you can go through 3 weather cycles. Although on Nintendo DS or 3DS, you can just alter your date and time so you can get whatever season you wanted to. Easily manipulatable, and the only thing that's really applies to are the Pokemon Deerling and Evolution Sawsbuck, because their different forms change depending on what season they were caught in. But their stats and abilities and whatnot don't change, it's just a outward form aesthetic. kind of like the different letters of unknown, just having different forms just for the heck of aesthetic, or what's another one? I can't think of another Pokemon off the top of my head because most other Pokemon who have different forms. Oh yeah, Vivillon, that's one. Different form just makes it more rare as a collectible, I suppose you could put it. But doesn't change their stats or abilities or anything like that for like competitive battling. And then let's see, what else about this generation? Oh yeah, I should also tell you guys that I have like no notes on this because I'm visually impaired. So even if I were to create like a big document with a script and whatnot, I would not be able to read it very well, and you'd probably just hear me just like, if I did try to read, I'd be talking slowly as I tried to read the script. So that's why I don't really make a script. I mean, I kind of like make bullet points here and there, or maybe just like a small little note of just like what I want to talk about and in what order. Just like not Pokemon, but like topics. So that's essentially what I usually do, just so I can just have my thoughts just roll off my tongue more coherently. Like if any of you are familiar with Izuku Midoriya from My Hero Academia, and you know about his little muttering, his little muttering side quirk, I suppose you'd call it. That's kind of like what I do. But anyways, that's all I can think of on Gen 5 right now. So that's the number 8 spot. So then we move on to the number 7 spots for my generations. Not really favorites or whatnot, but like just my personal experience and opinion. I unfortunately have to put the 4th generation at number 7. And I mostly blame this on the Sinnoh region for Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. Like, I was a Saint as a kid, and like, you're talking to someone who could play a game like Spyro Enter the Dragonfly on the PlayStation 2. I almost said PS2 there, but I just say the whole word there. And I could play through the game, and I could go through all the loading times. And anyone who's seen that game know how horrifically, obnoxiously absurd the loading times are in that game. Oh boy. So dealing with like all the slowness that Diamond and Pearl had, that was eventually fixed when Platinum came out. And while I do love Heart Gold and Soul Silver, unfortunately, my experience in Generation 4, again, I just mostly blame on Sinnoh, because this is when Game Freak decided to go like, oh hey, you know those HMs that we used in the previous 3 generations? Yeah, we don't think we're limiting the players enough. So why don't we add a bunch of them into both of these like games for both Sinnoh and Johto in Generation 4, and just force the player to have like, I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 Pokemon just loaded down with nothing but HM moves, so we can just force them to be both strategic and not strategic at the same time. Because seriously, first off, you have like the generic HM moves like Cut, Flash, Fly, Strength, Surf. Those are like the first 5. And then for Sinnoh, they decided to add like, let's see, there's Waterfall. I think Rock Smash is there. Oh yeah, Rock Climb. That was a new one. And then the most useless one. Did I mention Defog? Yeah, there's Defog, which is only used for like 1 section of the game. And like, if the foggy weather condition is on the field, it just lowers your accuracy, which is like the worst thing in existence for a playthrough. And then Defog just gets rid of that, so then the atmosphere just goes back to normal. And that only appears on 1 route in the game, and only in like a couple sections of Mount Coronet. Oh yeah, did I mention Mount Coronet of the Sinnoh region? Like, ugh, it's annoying, to put it plainly. Sinnoh just has a lot of annoyances. Like, when it comes to Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, just the gym puzzles themselves, like, they're not hard per se, but they're just very irritatingly annoying. Because like, let's see, first you have Rorik's gym, straightforward, you can literally just run straight forward, unless you want to avoid a trainer. Gen 2 Gardenia is like just a matter of hide and seek, in which all the trainers only appear 1 at a time as you find and battle each trainer, which is irritating. I mean, why can't they all just be hidden? Then you could have to find them, and they don't have to be in specific order. That what makes it very annoying. The 3rd gym changes depending on whether you're playing DP or Platinum. So in DP, you would fight Mei Lin, and that's probably the one gym puzzle I hate the most. Mostly just due to my visual impairment these days when I replayed it for BDSP. Or if you're playing Platinum, this is where Fantina's gym come in, which is infamously difficult because Shadow Ball is a way too powerful move for the third gym. Then the fourth gym is Crasher Wake, simple enough. Gym 5 would be Fantina. By that point, it's not that bad. Platinum, the order just mix around a bit. Generation, then Gym 6. Let's see. That's Canale City. What's his name again? Brian? Steel type? Not that bad. Then you have to go through all that annoyances to get up to Snow Point City. And get her gym, that's probably also very irritating to deal with. And then you have Gym 8 for Volkner, simple enough. Electric, I mean, his team doesn't even have all electric types anyway. That's also another issue with the Sinnoh region games, the Diamond Bomb. That was fixed in Platinum, but then the original DP, like, a lot of gym leaders or even members of Elite Four, their teams just don't have a full roster of the Pokemon. Because the Sinnoh regional dex only has like 150 Pokemon in it, and you have to keep in mind there's 107 Pokemon made for the 4th generation. They're technically counted as like Sinnoh Pokemon, like baby forms and evolutions of past Pokemon. These are all part of the 107 Sinnoh Pokemon, but the problem with the original Sinnoh dex of 150 is that a lot of those evolutions aren't even included in that dex. For like, say, like the evolutions for like, say, Magamortar, Rhyperior, Electivire, Togekiss, Tangrowth, Gliscor, Frostlass, Gallade, Dusk Noir, Licky. Like, these guys are not part of that 150 number, which is rather ridiculous because if they were, then the Sinnoh dex would be expanded more so, which I guess they did want to do to, I don't know, make things more difficult, because for the Sinnoh region is unique just in the fact that rather than having to catch all the Pokemon to complete the Sinnoh dex, you just have to encounter the Pokemon, like just see them, because if you look in the Pokedex, there's always the C number and then the COT number. COT meaning that which Pokemon you have actually obtained in some way, shape, or form, like if someone traded it to you and then you traded it back and therefore you just registered the data. Or if you caught the Pokemon then you evolved one to get a new form, the data still gets registered that way. So that just counts as COTs, and then of course there's just seeing, the ones you just see from NPCs or in the wild. So for the Sinnoh Dex, you just have to see all the Pokemon, and the cool thing about Diamond Pearl Platinum is that the developers actually make it so that it's possible to see all the Pokemon in the Sinnoh Regional Dex in a single save file, because it'd be unfair for you to not be able to complete your Pokedex if you had version exclusives and then you can't see them because you can't account them. Like even like the starters themselves, like since you only can choose one starter in each game, like you can see other starters depending on your rival's choice and your choice. So between yourself, you can see the Pokemon the starter that you have from your choice. So it's like, say for example, you chose Chimchar for your starter, so then for yourself, you can see and catch the Chimchar line, then it's because of that your rival would choose the Piplup line, but then that would leave the Turtwig line completely by itself, so then you would have tracked down the NPCs that have the Turtwig line in order to get all those added to your Pokedex and whatnot. The bad part about this is just the fact that some trainers, like say someone who has Riolu, if you don't want to get the egg from Iron Island, like the way it works, like you have to track down these NPCs, and if you don't find them, then you just can't complete your Pokedex unless you want to catch them yourself. So like say Riolu, his trainer is located like at the bottom of the Oreburgh Pass, which I think some people even forget the Oreburgh Pass even has a basement floor, because I mean if you're just going straight from Jubilife City to Oreburgh City, you probably just go from left to right, and then right to left vice versa when you return to Jubilife, and you probably don't even notice there was a pathway upward that would lead to an extra section of the Oreburgh Path, but because you need Rock Smash to get past it, you probably ignored it, or you just didn't know if it was there, and then you probably forgot about it existed later on, because in order to fully access the basement level, you need Surf, which you don't get until you beat in the 5th gym to be able to use it outside of battle, so then you just completely forget it's there, and then you just never find that trainer. So then later on, you're still like, how do I complete my Pokédex because I can't find Riolu? So yeah, that's just another downside. And I've just spent so much time complaining about Sinnoh, but that's just because Sinnoh, out of all the games I ever played, I think the Sinnoh region takes the longest to complete. Like, even if you would, like, raise your starter, trade it to another game, get it to level 100, trade it back over, even if you were to try to speedrun the game as best as you can in that method, unless you actually knew how to speedrun a game, and you're just doing things casually like that, especially if you're just trying to complete the Pokédex as well on top of that, like, I think the game would still take you somewhere around like 8 to 10 hours, which is quite a long time, because if I were to be honest with you guys, if I were to play a game casually, like from my experience, like the Gen 1 games, I could probably beat somewhere around 6 to 8 hours, same for Sword and Shield. Mind you, this is just beating the Elite Four and becoming champion. So like, if you want to count beating the game as just becoming champion, then Gen 1, Gen 2, somewhere around 6 to 8 hours. Same for Sword and Shield, actually. The third generation, I'm not sure how quickly I could beat those. But with my experience with Real Big Rebound Software, because I played those games like a couple of times. Back in Gen 6, I could probably beat those somewhere, I don't know, maybe 8 hours at best. X and Y, maybe similar amount of time. Generation 5 takes a bit of time. But Gen 4, from like my experience, 8 hours is probably a good, like if I'm really booking it and I'm just focusing on the story alone, maybe 8 hours, but then if I would focus on the Pokédex, then probably jump up to 10 hours, so it just takes a while. Heart Gold Soul Silver was a much better addition to the 4th generation because it had so many mechanics into it, like a much better expanded Johto Pokédex. But then, let's see. Its problems also stem from a couple other factors. I mean, Heart Gold Silver are more bad games per se, but like those two games just don't save all the annoyances from the Sinnoh games. And I don't get me wrong, I love Heart Gold Silver, especially when it came with the little accessory called the Poké Walker. I was on the track and field team at the time when that thing came out, so the Poké Walker became very easy to be able to play with during the course of that. I'm sure my coach might have saw me with that thing, but since he never called me out on it, I'm guessing it was fine, but just the fact that Heart Gold Silver, like, they stuffed in a bunch of things here and there to improve upon the original Johto games, like Kanto was actually fun to play in, the Safari Zone was reintroduced, Pal Park was brought in. Oh yeah, Pal Park. So this is the first generation in which Pokemon can be transferred from one gen to another. I mean, technically, we could send Pokemon from the Game Boy games of Red, Blue, and Yellow over to Game Boy Color games Gold, Silver, Crystal. But that was trading, not really transferring, and since Pokemon from Gen 2 couldn't be sent to Gen 3, they were stuck in Gens 1 and 2 cartridges. So Generation 3, Gen 4, and then this was like the beginning of like a pattern and whatnot to transfer the Pal Park for Diamond and Pearl. This is another downside, in that if you're going to transfer Pokemon, you can only transfer 6 Pokemon per day. Now technically there is a way you could trick the game into allowing you to transfer more Pokemon, but that's rather irritating. I'm not sure how many people would actually use that feature. But realistically, if you want to transfer a bunch of Pokemon, you can only transfer 6 Pokemon per day, every 24 hours, and yes, the Sinnoh games, or the DS games specifically, I should say, were very good at keeping track of your in-game hours. So if you try to trick the game in some way, then you'll be trapped out for another 24 hours, so that was also a major annoyance. Excuse me, kind of take a little water swing there. So let's say, for example, you're going to transfer, like, say, as many Pokemon from Generation 3 games over to Gen 4. So let's say 30 days a month, 6 Pokemon. That's 180 Pokemon in a single month. And there were a grand total of 386 Pokemon in Generation 3. So if let's say you want to transfer everything from Gen 3 over to Gen 4, that's like not even half. Because 180 times 2 is 360, which means it would take you like 2 months, about 2 months and, I don't know, like a week or so to be able to transfer everything from Gen 3 up to Gen 4 if you want to like do the full Pokédex. I mean, if you caught everything between Diamond and Pearl, Platinum, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, you could very well complete the Gen 4 Pokédex that way, and therefore you don't actually have to transfer as many things over from Gen 3 over, but that was only after Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and Platinum came out, so if you're just trapped just using Diamond and Pearl alone, I mean, there's still a lot of Pokemon you can catch in those games, so I guess mostly what you'd be transferring over would be mostly like the Kanto, Johto, and Hoenn starters from Gen 3 alongside their respective regions' legendaries. But even that, let's see. So from 3 generations of Pokemon, there are 9 the entire starter lines entirely. So that's 9 times 3 is 27. Then divided by 6. That's about 5 days worth of Pokemon, give or take. And then you include the legendaries. Oh boy. Which is why Heart Gold, Soul Silver were also nice additions to save the issues for Diamond and Pearl originally. And don't even get me wrong, don't even get me started on the Honey Tree mechanic. Ugh. Anyone who's played the original Ascending games knows about the Honey Tree mechanic and how much of a nightmare it is, especially the Munchlax. Anyone in the right mind would just transfer over a Snorlax and then just breed it to get Munchlax. They don't want to go through the Honey Trees. Especially when it comes to Feebas. Ugh. I'll get to that when I get to the Gen 3 games, but Feebas. And just getting Pokemon in Generation 4, Diamond and Pearl was just so irritating. It was so much easier just to get them from Platinum, Pokemon Soul Silver, which saved things, but reason why I put Generation 4 at number 7, there's so many irritants that I think I spent enough time just grumbling about that. It's almost been half an hour since I started recording, and I've spent most of that time talking about my irritants about the first 2 generations, which is why these 2 are at the smack bottom. So I think, rather than hearing me grumble about that, let's head to some more positive notes. So moving on to my number 6 spot, we have the 7th generation. And this one, unfortunately, also has a bit of a negative, quite a few negatives to it. I mean, anyone who's played Generation 7 just knows how hands-holdy it is. Like, how much these games feel like you're just going through a tutorial of sorts. Or just how long things take to do in general. Like, the original Sun and Moon story was decent, I suppose, but like, I mean, Gen 5 story, Gen 4 story, Gen 7, all these games have pretty good stories to them, in my opinion, but just how long it takes to get through like all the dialogue, just get through the games. The original Sun and Moon's credits are also infamous because you can't just leave your game there and just like go off and like take a coffee break. Why not? Because you actually have to look at your 3DS and you actually have to punch through a couple of dialogue boxes here and there. You have to do so manually, and then there's also that battle of Tapu Koko at the end. It's just really irritating to deal with all this stuff for Generation 7. Even though those are annoying, Generation 7 I actually started enjoying a bit more, and I actually found the way they like upgraded the user interface to be very interesting. I should have mentioned this for Generation 4 though. That's when they added the physical special split, as it's called, in which any of those of you who play Generation 1 to 3 should know that when it came to physical and special attacks, those were determined specifically on the Pokemon's types. Easy way to remember this is that all Pokemon types for Eevee's evolutions, not including Eevee himself, plus Dragon were all treated as special attacks. So then those would be Water, Electric, Fire, Psychic, Dark, Ice, Grass, and Dragon. And since Fairy type didn't exist yet, that's not included. But all those types I just mentioned will all be special attacks, which would leave everything else in all the other types as physical attacks. But in Generation 4, they split those apart. So moves like, for example, like Thunder Punch would finally be a physical move rather than the special attack that they've been for the Generation 2 and 3 that the move existed, which is why some Pokemon, like say Alakazam, were OP in Generation 2 because Thunder Punch was treated as a special attack. Or say Snorlax in Generation 2 and 3 was also a bit overpowered because he had access to Shadow Ball, and because Ghost types are treated as physical moves. This is why Shadow Ball was very powerful on Snorlax back then. or even Hyper Beam was also very powerful back in those days because, like say, Dragonite had a very powerful physical attack set, and since normal moves were treated as physical moves, this is why Hyper Beam did a ton of damage back then. And then Generation 4 just remedied this to make some Pokemon, like say Sneasel and its new evolution Weavile, more competitively viable because now its Ice and Dark moves could actually be physical damage because Weavile is actually a physical attacker, whereas Generation 2 and 3 that Sneasel pre-evolution existed was practically useless because its 2 stabs, Ice and Dark, were treated as special attacks back then. So then, for Sun and Moon, what they added was the user interface. They added like the quick button you can select to move through your Pokeballs, which makes it faster to reach for whatever Pokeball you want to use in battle, because previously you had to go into the bag. And while there did exist the button to use the last item you used, that last item is not always the Pokeball, so that doesn't quite count, but I guess it kind of counted. But in Generation 7 they added the button to specifically select whichever Pokeball you wanted to use. And also, in addition to the user AI, since this is still using the touchscreen for the 3DS, they allowed you to actually see descriptions of the moves that you have in your Pokemon, so you don't have to go to the summary page, which was nice. On top of that, you can also, with a touch of a button, see all the stat changes that go on in battle. Like say, for example, if your Pokemon has lowered stats, increased stats, you can all see these on the bottom screen now. And on top of that, you can also see if your moves is going to be super effective, not very effective, no effect, and just things like that. So like all this, it would also, like if you want to see like a move's information, it would show you the base power, accuracy, the move's description. All the information was now there on the touchscreen. Just for a casual player or a competitive player, these were all very nice additions to the UI, which is very nice. Of course, if you're doing this like in terms of just casual play, then this would only work on a Pokemon you've seen before. So if you just met a Pokemon for the first time in the wild or for a trainer battle, then you've got access to none of these benefits of like being able to see if the move is super effective or not. But if you've seen the Pokemon before, then you do get the benefit of seeing if the move is super effective or not. And another neat addition to Generation 7 is the fact that, like, let's say your team is already full, and then you catch like another Pokemon, you get the option if you want to actually add the Pokemon to your party right then and there, or you want to send it directly to your boxes. This is nice because, like, say for example, you've been like, let's say you caught like a Caterpie, you've been leveling it up, and then it finally evolved to Butterfree, so then you're done training the guy, and you want to send it off to your boxes, but then the Pokemon Center is too far away, so you catch another Pokemon to add to your Pokedex. You can then add that new Pokemon you caught to your party, so you can level it up, so you can add its evolution to your team. Like say, you just ran into a Craballer, I believe that was its name, and then you want to evolve it later on to its evolution of Crabrawler, Crabominable, whatever it is. So then you just select Butterfree to send back to your boxes, and then Crabrawler is just added to your party. This is a very nice addition. Kind of like a precursor to the Generation 8 Pokemon box storages. And then there's also some nice features from Generation 7, like the Pokepelago. Essentially just like an extra series of islands, like off to the shore of the Alola region, I suppose you could call them, that you could use to access a couple of different things. The most notable of which were 2 areas. One is where you can actually grow berries in mass, by the way. And then another was one that helped you with EV training. And then by using the beans you can find on the island, it could also help you in just like having the amount of time it would normally take to do this stuff. Like normally it would probably take like a full 24 hours. By using the beans, if you max out on them, you could then cut that time in half to 12 hours, which may still seem like a long amount of time, but considering the fact that some people have to go to work or school and whatnot, these features made just preparing for like online competitions easier. So that was definitely nice. And then you can also use the beans that you encountered, or not encountered, but collected in the Pokepelago to essentially used in the new version from a feature from version 6. This is called Pokemon Refresh. So essentially just increase your Pokemon's affection level, and let me tell you, I don't know if Generation 6 took advantage of this, but Generation 7 definitely took advantage of like the whole power of love mechanic, I'm supposed to call it. Like, for example, if you watch the anime and you see Ash cheering Pikachu on and saying, "You can do it!" And it seems like Pikachu is about to faint, but he holds on with like what seems like 1 HP. This is actually what the power of love and friendship in the Pokemon games can do now. So if your Pokemon has like a maxed out affection with you, and you know they do because when they hit the battlefield, they'll like hop in place twice, and the message will probably pop up that says how much they like you so much or something like that. And with these high affection levels, this could mean that a Pokemon could survive on 1 HP, or maybe they like heal away a status condition, or they even dodge an opponent's attack. All these things can happen randomly, but it's really just like an anime style thing that kind of makes the casual playthrough a bit OP in some cases, especially when Rotom powers are added in to the mix. And like Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon. So Generation 7 as a whole was a pretty interesting experience, although the one thing that made it really terrible is just the fact of how long the tutorial is. Like, even if you were to speed your way through the opening of Sun and Moon or Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, doesn't matter. It'd probably take you roughly, I don't know, like 40 minutes to 60 minutes to finally be able to reach the point in the game where you can access the online features, which, unfortunately, is the Festival Plaza. This is probably the one thing about Generation 7 I despise the most, because the Festival Plaza was very tedious. They fixed this in the Ultra games by adding in the Battle Agency, which did make things more interesting for the Festival Plaza, not to mention obtaining festival coins easier. Because back then, if you're playing Gen 7 games and you were trying to like collect festival coins, unless you were grinding like insanely, crazily a lot by doing all the festival games that they have in the Festival Plaza, the only other way you could obtain them was through like the online global missions. So unless you missed playing those, then trying to get your Festival Plaza's ranking ups, because by ranking up your Festival Plaza, this allows you to access more features to it. And if you just missed out on those, then unfortunately you just missed out on doing stuff, because as you rank up in the Festival Plaza, you get access to more like attractions, I guess you can call it. And then with more of these attractions added into your plaza specifically, you could then like add more daily events and whatnot, which really don't matter in the long run, but it's just interesting things to have. Excuse me. Had to take a swig. I mean, Generation 7 was also a bit of a mess because of more features. Like, trainer customization started in Generation 6, although they still continued onward to Generation 7, but the way they split it up between Sun, Moon, Ultra Moon is by color variation. So like, say, for example, Sun would have like the more bright colors, like red, yellow, orange, and then Moon would have the darker colors, like say blue, purple, and green, I think, which is rather bad, because if I had to choose between Sun and Moon, I like Solgaleo more, but then because I chose Sun, I can't access any of the blue colors, which is bad. And then not to mention the fact Generation 7 is also when they added in the Z-move mechanic, which is quite controversial in its own right. It's essentially, you give a special thing called a Z crystal to your Pokemon to hold, kind of like Mega Evolution's Generation 6, that cannot be knocked off. So your opponent can't really tell if your Pokemon has a Z move or just a regular item equipped to them, I think, when they look at the team previews and whatnot. And they just give your Pokemon access to a one-time move that can use, in which you can only use the Z move on a move of the corresponding type. So say, for example, using on, say, Mimikyu here, who's on screen, you give it like what's it called, the Farium Z crystal. So then you give it to it, and you can use its Play Rough Fairy type move to boost it up into, what was it, like, I forget what it's called. But like the grass type move was like Bloom Doom. And then Psychic was like Shattering Psyche and stuff like that. I think the Ghost type move was like something Eclipse, or it's like the Dark one. Breaking Blitz, I think was the normal type one. But anyways, each of these moves can only be used once per battle. And they can also break through Protect, but then they just don't do as much damage if they use on the Pokemon who use Protect. If Pokemon use Substitute before a Z move is used, then it just absorbs the Z move. But then there are also other ways Z moves can be used in like more strategic ways for like stat boosts and whatnot. Or some Pokemon even have it like species-specific Z moves. Like if anyone who's watched like the Sun and Moon trailer saw that like Snorlax got its own special Z move, and I just love the compilation they showed for that particular trailer. In fact, Generation 7, before Sun and Moon came out, had a ton of trailers just introducing a bunch of mechanics. Like, I think there were like 20 trailers, give or take, that just showed off a lot of information on Generation 7, like the Pokemon, like the events, the Z moves, the Ultra Beast. Oh yeah, that's another thing, Ultra Beast. Generation 7 also introduced like the whole multiverse theory into the Pokemon franchise and making it canon. Like anyone who's played the Ultra games, the one thing I love about the Ultra games in particular was like with the Ultra Wormhole mechanic, you could play the Ultra Warp Ride to encounter like other legendary Pokemon across the Pokemon franchise. That was a fun mechanic to do, and you can also use this to shiny hunt them. And also, if you just come across other random locations, the chances of you coming across just shiny Pokemon also increases if you do this, so that's also interesting to go through. But then the Ultra Beasts themselves in the Ultra games, like you can actually go to like their home world, like say the Ultra Deep Seas where Nihiligo is, Ultra Jungle is Buzzwole, and the Ultra Desert, I think that's where Pheromosa is, the Ultra Plant is Xurkitree, Ultra Crater is Celesteela, don't understand that one. Ultra Forest is where Kartana is, and then the Ultra Ruins. That's probably the most morbid place of all of them for Guzzlord, because essentially it shows you this one city. What's it called? Hiya City. Essentially, the Ultra Ruins is just an alternate version of the city where Guzzlord just literally ate the entire place down to the ground, in which you just have to navigate it through like a maze of course to reach Guzzlord, and just seeing it standing there just eating debris is pretty mortifying to look at. And then of course there's other Ultra Beasts you can obtain, like Poipole. It's the only Ultra Beast that can evolve into another form, and Naganadel, I don't know how you pronounce that thing. And then there are two more Ultra Beasts, Blacephalon and Stakataka, that are added to the Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon. Just really dope. The Ultra games added so many features that the original Sun and Moon didn't have, like move tutor moves through the different beaches of the 4 islands: Mele Island, Akala Island, Ula Ula Island, and Pony Island. And then the Mantine Surfing minigame was also fun. At least the first 3 courses were fun. The final 4th most difficult course on Pony Island is I've never beaten that course because just how irritating it is, because with all the Sharpedos spitting water at you, the tentacles just hitting in the water, the Wailord just popping out of the waves. There's so many obstacles in your way, and with my visual impairment, I just couldn't beat it, which is unfortunate because I couldn't get the Surfing Pikachu reward from it. Which is a shame, although considering what they did in Generation 8, I guess it's not that big of a disappointment, but still. But in terms of that, I should have mentioned this before, but let's see, back in Generation 5 and then 7, there weren't really any spin-off games worth mentioning. Although, I mean, Generation 5 did have Dream Radar, which just adds to the irritation of Generation 5 because that was the only way you can get like the Therian forms for the Genie trio, Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus. And also, only way I know of, you can also get hidden ability Pokemon here and there, but just that little mini side game for the 3DS, not really worth it in the long run. I mean, it's free, there's that. I mean, I think it was free, wasn't it? Anyways, if it wasn't free, it was cheap, maybe like $5 or so. Not that big of a deal. And in Generation 4, there was a spin-off game in form of Pokemon Battle Revolution that was released on Nintendo Wii. all it really did was just allow you to play Pokemon with very, very pretty 3D graphics, although considering all you did in that game was just battle, by transferring Pokemon over from the Gen 4 games on Nintendo DS, by connecting the two games together. It was interesting, but not anything groundbreaking compared to past games, so that's I don't think I forgot to mention that before. But Generation 7, no real spin-out games that came out that was tied to it, so nothing I can really think about mentioning. So yeah, those the bottom 3 generations, and now we move on to my 5th favorite generation, and this one's going to be quite controversial to you longtime Pokemon fans, and even I had a bit of difficulty thinking about the top 5 generations of sorts. I mean, the bottom 3 really had their issues, but the top 5, not so much in my opinion. I mean, true, they were each Pokemon game generations, they all have their issues and problems, but if you know what you're doing, there's always a way you can find a way to like just enjoy it. So at the number 5 spot, we have the first generation for Red, Blue, and Yellow. And if you're wondering why I'm putting the generation that started it all here, I mean, come on, these are the games that started it all. I mean, just look at that beautiful Charizard. Ooh! Although, considering that shinies didn't exist in Generation 2 later on, I guess in Gen 1 you can't really... I mean, here's a fun fact. If you play through Red, Blue, and Yellow, you would never know if you had a shiny Pokemon or not, but you technically could have a shiny because shinies in Generations 1 and 2 were completely based on their IV, so you could technically get a shiny Pokemon back then, you just wouldn't know. Until you traded over to like Gold, Silver, and Crystal, and you just threw into battle, and then poof! Which is why some people look through a very complicated like calculator of sorts, and like if they caught like a certain Pokemon, or like say Legendary, since they always gonna be at the same level, so they just look at the stats over. If they have the exact stat numbers, then it's shiny. If not, then oh well. But then just Generation 1, Red, Blue, and Yellow, I mean, true, I mean, it does have its downsides, like Gust, for example, is obviously a flying type move, but then it was treated as a normal type move back then. Bite was treated as a normal type move, became Dark in Gen 2. Charizard could only learn Flying Pokemon Yellow for some reason. Move deleters didn't exist, so if you saw your Pokemon an HM move, it was stuck with it forever unless you traded over Generation 2 games that have it deleted and traded it back. I mean, like, this is the generation that started it all, so it's really hard to find anything to complain about it. My only major annoyances I could really think of just come at Pokemon Stadium that was released for Nintendo 64, which, if you had access to the transfer pack, allows you to play with your Pokemon from the Game Boy games on your Nintendo 64 console, and just takes Pokemon and play over in like the Gym Leader Castle challenge. I mean, the Gym Leader Castle itself is not that difficult, but what's really difficult is the stadium itself. So I guess I put the Gen 1 games at number 5, mostly just because of Pokemon Stadium is annoying. Anyone who's played Pokemon Stadium just knows how difficult the Stadium mode is, especially on round 2. Ugh, that like level, like what, 15, level 20, 15 Dragonair? Like that one Fisher trainer has? Oh god. And not to mention Mewtwo as a whole to defeat. Like, I don't know, unless you bring like a bunch of Pokemon that use Explosion, it'd probably be very difficult to take out. But then the Gym Leader Council itself, I mean, you could technically just kind of cheat and just bring in a bunch of Mewtwo's on your team. I don't know if you could actually bring multiple Mewtwo's in, but if you're bringing one Mewtwo and one Mew, and because of how OP the Psychic type is in Generation 1, you could just sweep through this Pokemon Stadium. Heck, just bring in Alakazam into Gen 1 games and you could sweep through a good chunk of the game, unless you came across another Psychic type, then you might have to use another type of move. But with those excluded, Gen 1 was just fun. Not much to complain about, really. Just the limited Pokédex. Not much to do after completing said Pokédex. So, I guess if I want to think about the downside for Gen 1, since it's just the first games that came out, there's not much to do. Pretty bare bones. Which means we now move on to the number 4 spot, in which we have, which this to me is not so much of a surprise considering it's the next generation after, we have Generation 2, in which number one feature of this generation, shiny Pokemon were brought in. Yay! Other than that, I mean, I see that here, I'm eating a little snack here. Need to get some sugar going. But I mean, like, we get 100 new Pokemon added in, and I should probably mention at this point how many Pokemon each generation had. So, Gen 5 had 156 Pokemon, Gen 4 brought in 107, Generation 7, surprisingly, only brought in... Actually, how many did they bring in? I think it was like 60, 70, somewhere around there? Not that big of a number. Also considering the number of form variations, but the regional variants, I should mention those. You can include those alongside Mega Evolutions here and... Well, not Mega Evolutions, but like form exclusive because of Zeus here and there. Gen 7 had a few Pokemon here and there, but not many. And the Kanto had, of course, 151. 150 if we don't include Mew. Johto had 100 new Pokemon, 99 if we don't include Celebi, because Mythicals don't count towards the national Pokédex numbers. So say, for example, if you're in Gen 2, you can get your completing your Pokédex certificate if you just had a 249 Pokemon, rather than the max of 251, which you only get if you somehow had access to both Mew and Celebi, in which if you were playing the original cartridges, it's highly doubtful you would have them. But then if you're playing like the virtual console games on a 3DS, then yes, you could easily have access to the Mythicals. Although Mew is also accessible via like the... You can use like with the Ditto glitch or just Missing No glitch or other glitches just to get Mew in Gen 1. Gen 2, Celebi, you have to probably get via the coin case glitch. Unless you're playing the crystal version of the virtual console on the 3DS, then you can get Celebi that way legitimately. And you can even shiny hunt that one too. And then, let's see, Johto. I mean, the Generation 2 games Gold, Silver, and Crystal also had in like a spin-off game of like Pokemon Stadium 2 to go alongside it. And Gen 1 did have Pokemon Snap, which was definitely fun for a lot of players, but not me. That's why I didn't mention it, really. But Generation 2, I mean, you get access to the Johto region, and then once you beat in the game, you get access to Kanto. And I did mention this back in the... I'll talk about Gen 4 at the number 7 spot. Hellcore and Soul Silver fixed a lot of issues the original Gold Silver had, and like... It was just very barren, like there's not much to do, like... In Hardcore Soul Silver, you can catch like the Kanto legendaries at most of the places that they originally were in. Like Zapdos just sitting outside the power plant, which is kind of funny. But then like the Seafoam Islands in the original Gold Silver Crystal, it's just one cave in which you just fight Blaine in. In Hardcore Soul Silver, you can actually find one cave where Blaine is waiting for you, and then the other cave you can actually explore the actual Seafoam Islands to traverse it, in which you would eventually find Articuno. Moltres, I believe, was placed into Mount Silver in Hardcore Soul Silver, but then all the Kanto birds and Mewtwo, which Serena Cave was also brought back into Hardcore Soul Silver, so you can find Mewtwo that way. But then in the original Gold Silver Crystal, all the Kanto legendaries, not available. The Kanto fossils, also not available. Kanto starters, not available. You were just really restricted on what Pokemon you can access to. Like, between Gold, Silver, and Crystal, you can gain access to all of the 100 Johto Pokemon, but then all the Kanto Pokemon, you would mostly have to rely on trading them over from the original Kanto games via the time capsule feature, which is actually a nice feature that was added in. Excuse me, chewing here. Anyways, time capsule is a feature that was added in by Bill, the Pokemaniac that you first met in Generation 1. So what allowed you to trade Pokemon between Generations 1 and 2 games. Only problem is, if you're in Gold, Silver, and Crystal, you can only trade over the Kanto Pokemon, and they cannot know moves that they did not know back in Gen 1 games. For example, like say Venonat, he learns Foresight in Generation 2, which was a move that did not exist in Generation 1, so you had to delete that. Or say if you had the Pidgey that learned the Mudslap TM, you would have to delete that. before you can trade over to Gen 1. And just things like that. So no new moves and no new Pokemon can be traded via time capsule. Although I just love the aesthetic of Johto and just like the way that they just set things up, like you just go through the game. And I think it actually has like a very good level of difficulty. I mean, that like starter Pokemon always pretty much just set the stage for like whether a game is gonna be like easy, standard, or hard. And I didn't even mention them up until now, but that's mostly just because like the starters in those generations they do impact it in a way, not too much. I mean, like back in the 8th choice for Generation 5 Unova, Snivy, Tepig, and Oshawott, you could pretty much have a decent playthrough just with any of those 3 stars without changing things too much. Gen 4, pretty much the same thing. I mean, let's see, Turtwig, Chimchar, and Piplup. I mean, Rourke is the first gym leader, but like Chimchar, if you just train him up to like evolve into Monferno, I believe there's a fighting type move, which then can counter the rock type. So again, not that big of a deal. And then Gen 7, considering the first trial you have is the normal type trial. And all 3 stars don't really matter here either, especially considering that in the first trial you could find like the Brick Break TM, and if you have a Pokemon that can learn it, you can just take down the normal types easy. It's almost as they planned out on purpose. Although Gen 1, this is where the whole difficulty really does come into play. Like Bulbasaur is easy, Charmander is hard, Squirtle is standard. But then for Johto, oh boy, this is really where things come into play. Like Chikorita is definitely the hard mode because you have to look at all the typings of the gym leaders. Like Falconer is a flying type, and Bugsy, second gym leader, is bug type. Chikorita does not stand a chance against either of those types. And then Whitney is the normal type gym, so no stat advantages there. Morty is a ghost type gym leader, in which all the ghost type he has, unfortunately, are just all Ghastly in its evolutionary line, which are part poison. So anything Chikorita can learn by that point in the game just is either not very effective or just has no effect. And then from there, gyms 5 through 7 you can do in any order, but once again, unfortunately Chikorita just can't do much of anything against any of them. So yeah, Chikorita is definitely the hard mode for Johto. Standard mode and easy, I'm not exactly sure which one I would call easy, because Cyndaquil I suppose could be considered easy because a lot of the Pokemon you face early on in the game are like bug or grass types, and especially at like the Sprout Tower in Violet City, Cyndaquil can just use Ember to just burn through all of them so easily, and if you get enough experience points, you can evolve level 14 into Quilava early on, so then if it's second stage starter pretty early on, and its fire typing can also burn through Bugsy's gym very easily. So I suppose in a way Quilava could be seen as easy mode, and then Totodile is like the standard playthrough, which is kind of funny because I think most people choose Totodile to play the game. I mean, it is my favorite starter for Johto. I do love Cyndaquil and Chikorita in their own respects, but Totodile is definitely my favorite. And oh yeah, another thing you also notice about Johto is that like I think it's like the only games in terms of like the version exclusives, just Gold and Silver, you can actually access to like both box art legendaries in the single game. Like say if you look at Unova, you can only catch one of the other, Reshiram or Zekrom, and then the only way you can get the other ones by trading from another version. Same goes for Diamond and Pearl. For Palkia and Dialga, I mean Platinum, you can technically get both of them there, but we're just looking at the version pair that was first released. Like Sun and Moon, Solgaleo, Lunala are exclusive there. Let's see, then Kanto, there's no like legendary card or story there, so you can get all 4 Kanto legendaries there. But then we can look at Johto, you can get both Lugia and Ho-Oh. Although if I had to say any annoyance about the second generation, it's just like So like it has one of the lowest numbers of Pokemon you can obtain, like 100. Like so, you're just like, oh, it's only 100. This should be easy to complete the Pokedex, right? Wrong. And I say that loudly and proudly because you may think 100 Pokemon is simple enough, but no. Like on screen right now, we have this Tyranitar here. You cannot catch Larvitar until you get to near the end of the game, so you can't even get the pseudo-legendary until you get to like Mount Silver area. And then you still have to level it up. I think you catch it somewhere around like level 30 or 40, so I guess you can quickly get it to evolve to Pupitar. But then getting it to evolve to Tyranitar at level 55 is another issue altogether. And a lot of the Pokemon are part of the Johto 100 Pokedex. You can take away the legendary dogs, which this is when they started like the whole roaming Pokemon feature, which can be annoying, but it's not that bad in my opinion. Since I grew up with it, I never really thought of it that bad. Just irritating, not that bad. But then we got legendaries. Let's see. Let me count here. 8. Then take the starters. 9. That's 17. That brings you down to about 83 Pokemon left to obtain. Sorry, chewing. But then there's also a lot of baby Pokemon added into the decks. So let's see. You have Pichu, Igglybuff, Cleffa, Togepi, Tyrogue, Magby, Elekid, and Smoochum. That's 8 baby Pokemon right there, and then you include their evolutions. For them, let's see, that would be Togetic and Hitmontop. That's 10. So that you minus down to the 73. And then you just include all the evolutions for like past Pokemon. Like say Steelix, Politoed, Slowking, Scizor, Kingdra, Porygon 2. And then the Johto Pokedex is also filled with a lot of Pokemon that just like don't evolve. They're just like standalone Pokemon, like say like Stantler, Smeargle, Unknown, Misdreavus, Murkrow. I mean, Murkrow and Misdreavus they do get evolutions in Generation 4, but if you're just talking about the original Gen 2 games, then they don't evolve. Heracross, Aipom, just a lot of standalone Pokemon. So like, completing the Pokedex just takes a while because there's all over the place and they don't really evolve. Although I did, for some reason, I don't know why, but like Chinchou and its evolution Lantern really intrigued me as a kid. Maybe because it's the first water electric type, which they're actually part of some of my favorite types of Pokemon. But I just don't know why it intrigued me so much back then, and even still now somewhat. Sorry, I just keep chewing. It's a little bit after lunchtime when I'm recording this, and I guess I didn't have enough big lunch, so that's why I'm trying to get some sugar going while I'm recording this. But oh yeah, there's also that fun feature for the Pokegear. So essentially, just like a little watch that you have. But I can't really think of a downside per se I can think about Generation 2, other than the fact just because of the limitations for the Game Boy Color. They just had to strip down a lot of features like the Safari Zone, Viridian Forest, Seafoam Islands, the power plant was completely scrapped. Kanto was just really cut down and barren, like Mount Moon is also small too. I really look at like the daily events they have, like depending on the time of, not the time of day, but like the day of the week, you can also find these like groups of 7 siblings all over the Johto region, which if you find them all, they give you special items that boost the Pokemon's power if they use a certain type of move, which is very nice. And then just the whole like Japanese aesthetic for Equity City, the way that it was built and whatnot. I just like Johto, just like the aesthetic, the feel, the atmosphere. It's just very pleasurable. So technically speaking, I guess you can say That's why it's my favorite region, but in terms of generation, that's why I only put it at number 4. In terms of my experience, but in terms of my favorite region, Johto is definitely at the top. But the reason why the top 3 spots are filled with different Pokemon regions is because of how I experienced them. Hence, this is why I call it my top 8 Pokemon regions, because of my experiences with them. And unfortunately, since Generation 2 only consists of 3 games, for like the Game Boy Color, that's why it's only number 4 spot. So, moving on to the 3rd spot, this may surprise a lot of you even more, we have the 8th generation! I mean, just take a look at this particular guy. Yeah. This shiny Galarian Moltres. He may look like his original Kanto form, but no, this is actually the... This is the Galarian version, right? Yep, Dark Flying type. Shiny. Is he T there? And he's in Cherish Ball. Yep, this is the correct guy. Come on, zoom out. Yeah. Our controller's acting up. There we go. But anyways... Yep, the Galar region is at number 3 for Generation 8, and, well, not just Galar itself, but just Generation 8 as a whole, because I mentioned this earlier, but like Generation 8, technically, if you want to include all the Nintendo Switch games that came out in the 8th generation, so like if you want to include all the main games per se, the ones that have like you can actually like trade Pokemon between via Pokemon Home, you have the Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee, Sword and Shield, Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, that is Arceus, so that's like 7 games right there. Whew! So compared to other generations with like these technical like mainline games of sorts, Generation 5 had 4, Gen 4 had 5, Gen 7 had 4, Gen 1 had 3, Gen 2 had 3, so Generation 8 definitely has the most. And then with all the spin-off games, oh boy. Oh boy. But then not to mention, this is also the first generation like in quite a while that I became very active online with various amounts of people. Like, this is when I discovered Discord, Twitch. I began communicating with so many people online. And just like my whole career as a content creator for Pokemon just really exploded at this point in time. Which is why I put it at number 3 spot in terms of like experiences. I mean, like, with the way Nintendo Switch is like works per se. I mean, not per se, just in general, but like with every single profile you can create another save file. So technically, on my one console, I can have 8 save files for Pokemon Sword, 8 save files for Pokemon Shield, 8 save files for Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and Arceus respectively. Just as long as I purchased like the game on my main profile first, I can then play all of them on my other profiles respectively on that one console. So by having multiple consoles, I can then just play the games multiple times over there with multiple save files, therefore also having more storage space. Like, the 8th generation just has so much to offer. Not to mention like the regional variants, like the Moltres on screen. That Dynamax feature was definitely fun. Being able to create rental teams and share them. The ability to use the Missing No glitch from the 999 raids to clone Pokemon to help people out in my community. It's just the 8th generation was just, I wouldn't say nostalgic because that's the one we're currently in, but just like, I haven't been this like occupied in playing Pokemon like in a long time, because like when Generation 7 came out, like Sun Moon kept me busy for a little while, but not like much because there wasn't much to do in those games. And then later on, when like the virtual console games for Red, Blue, Yellow came out earlier, in that same year's summer, I think, that also kept me busy for a bit. Because like by that time, Omega Ruby Battle Sapphire was definitely becoming boring for me at that point, because like there wasn't much anything else to do I could do in those games. But like even now, like Sword and Shield, BDSP, I always just find excuses I can think of to just go back to playing those games. Because like even though I already beat like the mainline game, like cut like all the legendaries, I can still shiny hunt, and just shiny hunting in these games are just so much easier than in like the past generation. I mean, the Ultra Wormholes were fun in Generation 7, but they were tedious. And then I don't really want to do shiny hunting back in the older games because the capture rates were, not the capture rates, but the shiny chances were just made easier later on, so that's why I don't really want to discuss them at the moment. And that's about it. I only want to say on Generation 8 right now because it's number 3 spots, and I think I already discussed my feelings on Sword and Shield, BD, and BDSP in other like podcast videos and reviews. So I just want to talk about them briefly. Just know the fact that it's because these games, they really motivated me to do a lot of stuff as of late, which is why I'll continue to Generation 9. So I just wanted you guys to know that my feelings on that. And with that, moving on to the number 2 spot. So if Generation 8 took the, what do you want to call it, like the bronze medal? So what's going to take the silver medal? Because we only have 2 generations left, which surprisingly are both multiples or factors of the other, in no matter of speaking, if you want to talk about math or algebra. So taking the silver medal at number 2 spot, we have Generation 6. And some of you might be looking at me like, what? Like, how the heck is Generation 6 at the number 2 spot? Which makes me wonder why that particular generation has it at number 1 spot, but then let me explain myself, because Generation 6 is very similar to Generation 8. And this is mostly just due to the whole online connectivity and whatnot, because this is when, I mean, online connectivity really started in Generation 4 with the Global Trade Station, the GTS. But that was just in small amounts and not that big. Gen 5 had some online connectivity, but not much. I mean, considering I wasn't really seeing anyone face-to-face or the chat room, I don't think Discord was available back then, so kind of hard to communicate back in those days, and not to mention online features in Gen 5 was just terrible. Gen 4 was just starting out, so it wasn't that great to begin with. But Gen 6 was really when I just went crazy when it came to online, like connecting with other people. I didn't have Discord yet at that time, but I just, via things like YouTube and Reddit, I was just really connecting with other people. This is also around the time, 2013. Like, if people were just missing away from Pokemon in Gen 5, 2010, 2013, in 2013, I just started meeting more Pokemon players again. Like, yes, I was still in college and whatnot, but like I was just meeting more people who were interested in Pokemon, like whether it be in person or online. X and Y, Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, while their stories in games were not all that interesting per se, especially the X and Y story, or lack thereof at that point. But like the online like features, like battling whatnot, and then like keep in mind that my vision over the course of period of time over these generations was really beginning to deteriorate here and there. I mean, in Generation 6, my eyesight was starting to go downhill by this point in time, at 2013 and 2016, between those 3 years. But it was still decent enough. I could still see to a certain extent. Like, say, I could still look at the Pokemon team preview and then see all the different sprites and then be able to tell what Pokemon my opponent had and then plan accordingly. I could still see that relatively well. My eyesight can't do that now, though. Don't even ask about that. But then just looking at things in the 6th generation, like the player search system, in my opinion, is still like the best player UI they've ever had. Like the Sea Gear in Gen 5 was terrible. The Festival Pause in Gen 7 was horrendous. Generation 4 had the Union Rooms, which was okay. Gen 5 also had the Union Room to an extent, but mostly just the Sea Gear. Terrible. But then the player search system in Gen 6 was still the best of all of them, of the main games. I mean, the Wycom in Gen 8 is interesting, but not the best. But I still love the player search system because you could, by using the touchscreen, you can see like the names and the avatars of all the people on your friends list, and any passerbys that you've interacted with, and then just a list of random people they could just try to connect to if you want to. Like, if you want to just like send an invitation for a trade or battle. And then there's also the O powers, which can help you in a matter of ways, like earning more experience, maybe encountering more Pokemon, earning more money, just lots of other features, like similar to the Rotom powers from Gen 7. O powers are where they first originated, and they're pretty overpowered, but very nice for earning experience points. And for that matter, earning experience in Generation 6, I should actually mention, is actually very easy. Whether you play S and Y or Omega Ruby Sapphire, earning experience points is easy, and then I just love the art style as well. But really, Generation 6 is also like the one I first became really serious when it came to competitive Pokemon. Like, I didn't become good enough to enter like a world championship or anything like that, don't get me wrong, but like, because of how they made getting access to things like high IV Dittos, Everstones, Destiny Knots, the breeding system was like overhauled and whatnot. It was just getting ready for kind of a competitive Pokemon X and Y. They transferred over to Oras, just became very easy back then. Which is why I spent so much time in Generation 6. Not to mention I spent a lot of time breeding Pokemon back then for like egg moves or just like adding to the collection, breeding for like the quote-unquote perfect Pokemon for like 5 max IVs at the very least. Although surprisingly, out of like the hundreds of eggs I did for breeding for the Pokemon, I never came across a shiny for some reason. I was breeding with a foreign Ditto, but I guess my game was broken or something. I didn't have the shiny charm, which was first introduced back in Black 2 and White 2. But I just never came across a shiny Pokemon back then for some reason. Just bad luck, I guess, suppose. But between those two games, I mean 2 sets of games, I really did enjoy Generation 6 a lot. The online competitions were fun. I interacted with a lot of players around the world. I mean, I never really spoke with them, but I interacted with them. So both the single and online experience was definitely lots of fun. And then the battles. I do love the fact that you can also save. This is also the first generation you could like save the battles you had with people online. Generation 7 also kept that feature, and I really just like how they did keep that in Generation 8. I mean, technically the only way you can record your battles is by recording them yourself, which is less than desirable. At any rate, we now will be moving on to the number 1 spots, in which there's only one generation left, so stay with me now. Taking the gold medal for the number 1 spot of my favorite generation is Generation 3! And any of you who knows about me, you know my mascot. Hello, Jirachi! Because this is where I got my name for the Generation Millennium. Generation, I mean, we've been talking about generation after generation of Pokemon, so I think you can see where I got that part of my username, screen name, whatever you want to call it. As for Millennium, that's due to the fact of the story lore behind Jirachi. Because if anyone who watched the movie Jirachi Wishmaker, Jirachi only wakes up once every 1,000 years for 7 days, a week, and after that he goes back to another 1,000-year sleep, which is pretty sad when you think about it, but considering they also say like some things only happen once every 1,000 years here and there. So the fact that Jirachi represents that is why I like him as my favorite Pokemon, and I decided to choose Millennium for my second part of my username. And here's a fun fact, both Generation and Millennium have a total of 10 letters in them. So between that and the space, in between the names, my Generation Millennium takes a total of 21 characters. 20 if you don't include the space between the 2 words. Fun fact. But then yeah, moving on to the 3rd generation. Similar to, let's see, Generation 4 was it? This one has a total of 5 mainline games in it. Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire, and Leaf Green. But then it can also stand a match to Generation 8 at the current point in time because there are also 2 spin-off games that were released back in Generation 3. While they are spin-off games, they are actually required if you want to collect the full National Pokédex in any coherent manner in the 3rd generation, because you have to look at it like this. Between Ruby and Sapphire, you can get access to the full 200 Pokemon in the Hoenn regional Pokédex. Although if you just want to go between just the Hoenn Pokemon themselves, then just 135 of them. I mean, 133 of them total. 135 if you include the Mythicals, Jirachi, and Deoxys, which Deoxys is exclusive to special events in Pokemon Emerald, so that doesn't really count. And as for the Jirachi, that was only available from a special bonus disc you got from Pokemon Coliseum, so Yeah. Excuse me, chewing. Yeah. So then, yeah, Ruby and Sapphire, you got all the Hoenn Pokemon there, and then Fire and Leaf Green. You can get the 150 Kanto Pokemon there. And in between those 4 games plus Emerald, you could technically obtain 97 of the 99 Pokemon from Johto. But just getting them was very, very... what's a good word? Obnoxiously tedious, I suppose? Because, like, say, if you want to get, like, a Johto starter, just a Johto starter, you have to go to Pokemon Emerald, complete the Hoenn regional dex, which is 200 Pokemon. If you're not going to include Jirachi Deoxys, that's just 200. And then once you have it, you go to Professor Birch, and then he'll offer you one of the Johto starters. Just one of them. Meaning, if you choose one, then you have to trade the Johto starter alongside probably your entire Hoenn dex back over to another save file of another game. Restart Emerald, then trade all the Pokemon back over to get a second Johto starter. Trade them all back to the other copy. Restart Emerald for a third time, trade all over again, and then get the third Johto starter. Just trading all because you have to do all those trade animations is also like say each trade animation takes like 1 minute or so to do, and then you also have to constantly keep switching your Pokemon in and out of your party and PC boxes to get all your Pokemon in and out. And then on the new save file Pokemon Emerald, you have to actually catch enough Pokemon to be able to transfer over an entire Pokedex. I mean, you could technically just transfer 6 at a time to keep adding 6 Pokemon to your Pokedex over and over again, because you don't actually have to keep them all on a single save file. Just constantly just switch between 6 Pokemon over and over again. So technically you only have to catch like 5 Pokemon, including your starter, just trade them all over. But still, the fact that you have to keep manually just switching Pokemon over and over from your main save file, then also you have to also do the waiting of connecting the 2 games via link cables. It was a whole mess, which is why when the spin-off games Pokemon Colosseum and XD Gale Darkness released for the Nintendo GameCube, this is where you can essentially just solve the issue of getting all the Johto Pokemon. Yes, you had to do some breeding still, like for example, in Colosseum you can catch Bayleaf, Quilava, and Croconaw, so then you can technically evolve them into their evolutions of Meganium, Typhlosion, and for Alligator, but then you still have to breed them to get their base forms of Cyndaquil, Totodile, and Chikorita. And then that was also the same issue for a lot of other Pokemon, like you can catch like Noctowl, Quagsire, Skiploom, Houndoom, I think. So then you still have to breed them to get their first evolutionary forms. But then between other games, they still added in other features, like in Fire Red Leaf Green, this is where you can catch the Unknown, but unlike Generation 2, which only had 26 letters of Unknown, in Fire Red Leaf Green, they added on a special place called Tanabe Ruins, which is just a set of like 7 islands to the south of 7 Island. How original. You can also find 2 new forms of Unknown, the exclamation point and the question mark, which only have a 1% chance of appearing in 2 of those different rooms, which is pretty interesting. Especially since I don't know why they added in those 2 forms there, but, I mean, they're there. I'm still curious as to why they haven't added like the period by this point in time. And then let's see, what else was there? Oh yeah, and then if you play like Pokemon Colosseum, if you play through like the entire game and you complete the objective of catching and purifying all the Shadow Pokemon from Colosseum, you could then go through the Mount Battle Challenge, and if you win the 100 battles in a row, and yes, you actually have to win 100 battles in a row, then you could also obtain a Ho-Oh as your reward there, which is the only way you can get Ho-Oh in Generation 3. And then from XD Gale Darkness, you can obtain Lugia over there, which is the only way you can get Lugia in the Generation 3 games, unless you have access to the Naval Rock event in Fire Red and Leaf Green, which then if you play through that, you only get to choose one of those Pokemon, so you have to go through the event like twice on different save files and whatnot to get access to both legendary birds. So unless you had access to those kinds of things or hacking like through Game Shark or something, then you're out of luck. Pokemon Emerald also had special events for letting you catch Mew and Deoxys. Jirachi was through the Coliseum bonus disc. But I think the only one missing was Celebi, although if you got the Coliseum bonus disc in Japanese, I think that one gave Celebi instead of Jirachi. Because funny enough, Celebi is actually part of like the story for Pokemon Coliseum, in this matter of speaking. And as for Jirachi, he's not really part of the story, but I think they only included him because they just wanted to promote the Jirachi Wishmaker movie that was out around that point in time. I mean, that bonus disc, all it really offered you was just the ability to download Jirachi into your copy of Ruby or Sapphire, which could also be shiny, by the way. It's actually very quickly way you can actually shiny hunt it. You're going to inject one into your new save file, so all you had to basically do was restart a copy of Ruby or Sapphire, play through the game normally as you would until you get to the Pokemon Center in Odell Town, which I think maybe takes like 5-10 minutes, give or take. And once that's done, you can just stay inside the Pokemon Center, then connect to the bonus disc, and then just download Jirachi, check if it's shiny. If it's not, just reset the game and then just try over again. True, it's tedious, but it's still doable, although you're going to be going through like the 8,000-ish odds, so good luck if you still want to do it. Thankfully, myself and other players have actually already gotten that Jirachi shiny, so I offered that via trades on Discord and whatnot if you want to know to get, among other things. So I guess this is a good plug-in to say links down in the description below for all my social medias and whatnot. Please support me over there, as well as here on YouTube when I upload this finally. And I suppose that's all I really wanted to say on the different generations of Pokemon. I mean, I do have things I could say. I could sit here all day just talking about my experiences, but I doubt you won't listen to me that long. How long have we been here? Let me look at the recording. Oh wow, almost one and a half hours, 90 minutes. So I think I've been talking here pretty long already. You guys are probably pretty tired of hearing my voice. If you stuck around this long, then wow, thank you so much for listening. And I suppose, like I said, links down in the description below for all my social medias. Subscribing here on YouTube and any other places would also be nice. I'm pretty active on Discord. If you have any questions there, you can shoot me messages there and whatnot. And as per usual, I just really can't think of anything to say for an outro, other than thank you all for sticking around. And I guess I'll just see you all next time. Take care!